Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Good. Let's talk about Iraq.
Yeah,
it's in the news, and that's what people want to hear about. And we're looking around, so we find out all the information so we can figure out what they're doing. It's not all that easy. But a significant event occurred yesterday, after a couple of days after the killing, and that is that there was a letter circulating that said that the American government was planning to leave Baghdad, leave Iraq. Then all of a sudden, they said it was released by the commander, U.S. commander in Iraq, and it said that we were laying plans for this. But it was quickly denied by the officials, because that would have sounded like surrender and capitulation, and the parliament says you guys have to leave and we're going to leave, and that wasn't to be true. But figuring out why they did it, I mean, the letter was significant. We heard 2 or 3 interpretations. We've been told that it was just a draft of a letter in preparation for us leaving, and quite frankly, I believe there's a lot of deception going on, and we haven't figured out exactly what their plans are. And Daniel, one thing that's possible is maybe we can't figure out exactly what they're planning, because they might not know even what they're planning, because it goes back and forth, and maybe it changes from minute to minute. And there are a lot of questions coming up now when you think about Russia and Putin getting involved in peace negotiations and all these other things, and more threats. They're on again. But more specifically, I want to talk a little bit about how something like this letter came up. I have a little trouble believing that it's just an accident and ineptness. This is a big deal. If it is mistakenly released by accident or something, that means they have no control whatsoever. So that's the reason that it's not exactly a false flag, but it's false information and deliberate deception, and maybe to settle things down. Say, well, we're not ready to send in the troops. We're ready to negotiate and talk about, getting out. And maybe if we up the bribes to the different people, we can convert enough people in Iraq to put up with it for a longer time. After 13 years, I think we're very close to admitting defeat, just like we had to admit defeat in Iraq and move out of there. So there's a lot of things that can happen in a few days, and it can change immediately. I listened to Pompeo this morning in his press conference, but I couldn't stand it because it was all just pompous talking, and I was looking for a hint from him, but there was no reassurance, there was no understanding, no real information. It was all pure deceptive propaganda about how wonderful we are and why we're seeking peace. We kill people because we want peace and not war.
Yeah, it's a strange mystery, and on the surface it's just, it must have been a mess up or something, but if you really stop to think about it, it's very, very suspicious, the whole thing. And so I wanted to go back and kind of put together what we know about it, because we know how these things are often scrubbed from the media. But first of all, here's something that I was told from someone who's an insider, that there really is a fight inside the White House administration. The Trumps for leaving, but Milley, Esper, and Pompeo are stonewalling him, so for what it's worth. But here's what we do know. The U.S. has suspended its anti-ISIS training mission to Iraq. I would say indefinitely suspending this mission. That's the only reason they were in Iraq. Remember, there was no status of forces agreement with Iraq. It was simply an arrangement made by the Iraqi government with the U.S. government. Please come in, we're overrun with ISIS, we need some help fighting them, and this is the only basis. So if you suspend that mission, there is no basis to keep U.S. troops in there. And I think a lot of Americans don't understand that. They just we're there because we've always been there. But then you have the Pentagon saying we're committed to the mission, which is sending completely mixed signals, because the Pentagon canceled that mission and ISIS is defeated. So what is the purpose of us being there? We're there because we're there. So that brings us to why release the letter, what is the letter? And I'm going to go into some details later, but just to throw it out there, one day the Iraqi parliament votes to end the mission and to ask the United States and all foreign forces to leave its soil. The next day, or a day and a half here and there, this letter leaks from the U.S. general in charge of Iraq, the Iraq mission, and it's a bizarre letter. It's unsigned. I'll read a little bit of it. Sir, in due deference to the sovereignty of the Republic of Iraq, and as requested by the Iraqi Parliament and Prime Minister, we will be repositioning forces over the course of the coming days and weeks to prepare for onward movement, etc., etc. Some details. We will take measures to minimize the disturbance to the public. As we begin implementing the next phase of operations, I want to reiterate the value of our friendship and partnership. We respect your sovereign decision to order our departure. Very suspiciously sounding, don't you think?
Absolutely, and I think the deception is very strong. That is a word we probably have described accurately. But the report also has been that they've removed hundreds, or they plan to immediately remove hundreds of our people out of Baghdad. And at the same time, we're not leaving, and if you think we're going to leave, you're going to have to pay us for building this building, or building the embassy. But now, it's back and forth. The sanctions on Iraq is something super sanctioned. We spent all this time, all this money, 1,000 American lives or maybe more, and many thousands of Iraqis and others that were killed on this. And all of a sudden, then we literally deliver politically the Iraq system over to Iran.
Yeah.
And now we're fighting them, and they're fighting to get us out of there. Sometimes when I make statements that this is just, they're really ridiculous. They don't know what they're doing. And others will correct me at times and say, they know exactly what they're doing. Chaos is good for them sometimes. But I think that they don't always know what they're doing, other than the fact that they know what they don't want, and they don't want a free society, and they don't want us to be a non-intervention society. And I know they want to support the military-industrial complex, so we can rule out a lot of things that they claim they're sincere about. The most ridiculous, of course, is this idea we had to kill them because we wanted to prevent a war. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Somebody is going to believe that. Today, when they were interviewing Pompeo, he asked the reporters, how many people in here believe that Soleimani was on a peace mission? He could have been.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure. But this whole idea that they know absolutely that they're Hitler, and then Zarif, of course, is a Hitler too.
Yeah.
They won't even let him go to the United Nations. I mean, they're moving back to an uncivilized society as long as we're in there, but we're struggling to maintain our empire. And I think we're on the defensive, on defending the empire.
Yeah, and on the defensive, I think, because this is such a bizarre story, the letter. And here's a couple of things. Here's what we do, and also some things we do know about it. And some of this is according to a good article in the Dispatch that sort of broke it down. At least this is the timeline that I've seen. First of all, the story of this withdrawal letter broke on the TV channel of an Iraqi militia group. We say an Iran-backed Iraqi militia group, the AAH. That group is on the U.S. terror list. Apparently, it was leaked to them by the Iraqi Prime Minister's office, and they publicized it. From there, it quickly, like wildfire, ran through the U.S. news media and became a huge story here, origins being in the Iraqi Prime Minister's office. Then the U.S. military was sent scrambling. What is going on? They had no answer at first. It was a weird letter. It was unsigned. It had some unusual grammatical errors. So the question is, what happened? What really happened with this letter? And we'll never know. But I have a couple scenarios I will bring up if you'll indulge me for a second, Dr. Paul. First of all, maybe we can talk about each one. Maybe it was leaked by some U.S. Group, maybe some neocons, maybe some people in the military affiliated with neocons to make Trump look bad. Here he is talking tough. Hey, you're going to pay us. We're going to sanction you. And then behind the scenes, he is sending a letter saying, we're going to withdraw. We respect your sovereignty. That's one. Could be fabricated by Iraq or Iran to make the U.S. look bad. Here, look, they're running with their tail between their legs. That's possible. Could be fabricated by Israel or even the Saudis. Force a denial, get a denial on record. No, we're not pulling out. We're not pulling out. That's a possibility. As you suggested in your opening points, it could be a monumental foul-up. It makes you wonder about operational security if something like this would have to be, classified, drops out. And Esper said at first, we just don't know. And then Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, later said, and this is the weirdest part, the letter is a draft. It was a mistake. It was unsigned. It should not have been released. Well, if that's the case, who released it? And why would you release a draft of a letter so inaccurate as you claim? Why would you give that to the Iraqi prime minister? Hey, here's a letter that says the opposite of what we're going to do. What do you think about it? So nothing adds up in this. And I hate to, but my head is about to explode.
Well, we do know that the Russians don't sit idly by. They pay a lot of attention. They've invested a lot. They live in the neighborhood, and they are just coming off a relatively successful event in Syria. In many ways, we lost Syria, it seems, except we're clinging to a few oil wells that we're going to pay for our troubles. But I think Putin is no dumbbell, and now he's talking about bringing these people together. He really is talking peace, and people would, the neocons would say, there you go, stop peddling. Yeah. And you know how the liberals hate Putin too.
You're on the payroll.
Look at how much hate they've directed him because they had to mix him up with Trump.
Yeah.
So this is the whole thing. But if you can sit back and just sort of analyze this, Putin has come out pretty well, and he doesn't. What does he have? One aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
So he doesn't come out and he's not bombastic because he really doesn't have it. But he's been able to do that. Now he's talking about bringing these factions together, and we've delivered it to him on a platter.
Yeah.
Here we used to have a lot of problems there that we created all along, and that is with Saddam Hussein. He was a minority Sunni, and he was militant, and he ruled with an iron fist, but there wasn't the chaos in the Middle East either. So we finally said, well, it's in our interest, we have to get rid of him. And so the Shia, which are the majority, they become close allies with Iran. Amazing. Who would have ever predicted that?
Yeah.
So there they are. So Putin's involved, and he's identified, of course, with the opposition. And maybe he's old enough to remember what happened in 1989 when they had 79, I guess it was, when they had to when the Soviets declared a lost victory, loss with Iran.
And what's interesting is that you mentioned Putin because he made a surprise visit to Damascus today, in meetings with Assad, and you have to wonder. And of course, we'll be accused of being on the payroll, and where's my check, right? But just looking at it analytically, you don't have to, take any side. But he comes in just like he did in 2015. Ironically, Soleimani is the one who gave him the strategy to defeat ISIS. He comes in a mess like this where he sees war on the horizon. There's no benefit to Russia if this thing blows up in the Middle East. No question about it. So here he does come in. Is he a peacemaker? I don't think it's because he's a peacenik, but I think he looks at the situation more analytically. You mentioned Pompeo. Pompeo and Pence, they lie. Every single sentence is a lie. And the problem is when you base the policy off of the lies you tell, it's basically garbage in, garbage out. You can't come up with a good policy when all of the basis for making that policy is false. And that's the problem that we're facing.
When I hear the two, Pence and Pompeo speak, I think they think that every American citizen is an idiot, and they're going to gobble this up. A lot do, and it's constant, it's incessant, and it is done by the experts on TV, and a lot of people fall in line. But most of these people who fall in line that quickly, they can't be dependable, and they finally turn against them. And they did this with look how negative they look on the war on Iraq, and yet everybody was for it. So it'd be amazing if they can accomplish this and get the people really generating enough enthusiasm to really go back to war on Iraq. And that's what we're doing. I mean, it's Iraq now, I see them as very close to Iran.
Yeah.
And sanctions. So all that effort, and the answer is we just don't have enough sanctions on Iraq. We saved them, we created their country, but if people would say, yeah, sanctions are sort of like the kind of thing you do when you're at war.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a hot war, it usually creates a hot war. So they have to have a tremendous desire to be rulers and running an empire to overlook the common sense of how stupid these policies are and how many lives are lost, how many American families and people suffer the consequences, and how many people we have to kill. One of the worst statement that ever came out of this transition was when they asked Madeleine Albright, well, you know that bombing in the bombing of Syria for almost a decade, that 500,000 children and people died from this. And she dismissed it. Well, that's the price you have to pay.
Yeah.
So that to me is so tragic.
Yeah, in Iraq, I mean, we destroyed it for 30 years now. We've been destroying it, and now we're threatening it again. But the thing that really is just depressing in a way is how strong the propaganda is. And as I predicted yesterday, there was a lot of pushback to our show on the assassination of Soleimani. Interestingly enough, Moon of Alabama has an article up this morning where they point out that we actually were allied with Soleimani. There is the Wikipedia page where it shows that joint commanders of an operation in Afghanistan were a U.S. general and Soleimani. So it wasn't always that way. But the propaganda is so strong, the pushback is, so you think it's great, you think it's terrible that we killed a guy who's responsible for the deaths of 600 Americans. And as Scott Horton at the Libertarian Institute, a good friend of ours, he had a really good blog post. He said, this is an absolute lie. First of all, that is blaming the Iranian Shia militia for every single American killed by these roadside bombs, which is not technically, they're not capable of doing. And the second thing, and actually this was backed up by Matthew Ho, who, as we know Matt, and he was there. He said, I was there, and I will tell you, these IEDs were Iraqi-made, Iraqi-manufactured, and placed by Iraqis. This was not an Iranian operation. So this is a propaganda lie, just like all of the ones that they make, Saddam's WMDs, et cetera, et cetera. This is a propaganda lie, and it sticks in the minds of Americans, and they want to use it to make us look bad, right, to make us look like we love this guy, when we just have to look at the facts. So I guess I would close by saying something that Dr. Paul said. This is all interesting, but guess what? The withdrawal is happening anyway. The U.S. admitted that a repositioning was taking place. They got to take troops out of Baghdad because it's no longer safe to have our military in Baghdad. That's what happened. That's the results of bad foreign policy when you believe your own lies. It's supposed to make us safer? Supposed to stop a war, Trump? Well, it looks like it's starting one. We can't even have our military there. And frankly, they're not even wanted. So as Dr. Paul said in his column yesterday, it's probably a good idea for them to listen to the Iraqi democracy, bring these troops home. The mission is over. There's no reason for us to be there. Why have these guys out there waiting to get killed for nothing?
Very good, Daniel. I want to finish up with another rumor that's going around. It's been in the news, and it's frightening because I think there's still a lot of people serious, and that is the restoration of the draft. And this is serious because once it does a couple things. One, it endorses the principle maybe we're going to be in a hot ground war, which I keep arguing that they're not that stupid. And the other thing is it's the statement that the state owns us. The income tax is a statement that they own our income and they own our life, and they take it and allow us to keep some at their bidding. But when they say that they can draft you when they need you at a certain age and discriminate and all these things that they do, I think it's a bad sign. You might say, well, who would want to do that? Would Trump want to do that? And I think that Trump isn't the one that's going to want to send troops and tanks and all there. He wants to talk tough. And the draft might be a way to talk tough because he really praises the military. He really gets emotional about building up the military. And he's capable of doing it. But the neocons would love this. And he is influenced by neocons. They're the ones who were advising him before the assassination was occurred. So he is susceptible to this. So I hope this goes away, but there were, several articles over the weekend about this. Maybe the draft will have to come back, which would be a horrible, horrible sign. And we just have to be alert to that. Of course, it's always possible because if we continue to do what we're doing now, and even as our empire weakens, there's going to be somebody in office that's going to be more desperate to survive, and that is with the use of ground troops in order to maintain their empire. But we have a lot of places to go. And we have We have control and troops in 150, 160 countries. So to cover our bases there, we would need a lot more personnel. So the answer, of course, is very easy, very simple, and it's very constitutional, and it's very moral, and that is that we should have a non-interventionist foreign policy. We should mind our own business, take care of our country, have our protection, but not get involved in internal affairs of other nations. And we have to pay a price by people taking away our liberties, as it's been happening ever since 9/11. It's not going to work. The people are going to be disgusted, and their voices aren't heard right now. I just don't believe this country's as bad as what I hear on the evening news. That is just horrible. So that is why we have to generate some excitement and interest to hear another message other than what we've been hearing so far from the mainstream media. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.